Hello everybody and welcome to the first discussion video for the long-awaited The War Between the Land and the Sea. Before I go any further, just in case you haven't seen the episodes, obviously our viewers outside of the UK haven't seen the episodes yet, or maybe you have. However you do that, up to you. I'm not judging, but there will be spoilers in this video, hence the title, Spoiler Discussion. So if you haven't seen episode 1 and 2 of The War Between the Land and the Sea, maybe click off this video and come back when you have. Hello, Sean. How are you?
I am very good. How are you? You seem happy, which is a good sign.
I am very happy. If people have seen the ups and downs for episode 1 and 2, which you should go check out if you haven't already, I was pleasantly surprised by this spin-off. We've had a little bit of some choppy waters over the last couple of seasons of Doctor Who itself, so it was really nice to have something that I didn't come away feeling a little unsure about and was genuinely excited for the next episode.
This is shocking news to me. Your last few videos on Doctor Who have been so positive, like overwhelmingly positive.
Don't get me in trouble. Obviously, people will have heard my thoughts on the episodes in great detail from the ups and downs of videos, but what they haven't heard is your thoughts on the episode. So, Sean, can you give me your thoughts on and feelings about Homo, Aqua, and Plastic Apocalypse?
I flipping loved them. No, I really enjoyed them. So I fled to the UK to watch them. So I am recording this in Glasgow, in Scotland at the moment. So yes.
That's commitment, folks. No complaining that you can't watch the episodes. Sean flew over to watch them. I'm pretty sure that's not why he flew over, but still.
I mean, like, this week's plane trip took me to the UK. And no, I really enjoyed it. So the trailers and the clips that we'd seen had, I'd really started to get excited for it because, if you remember 19 years ago when the title of the series was announced, I think we were all just like, that's a mouthful. Okay, right, grand. And then, they were like, Sea Devils? Okay, that's a choice. Yeah. And instead, what we're getting is a series that is thoughtful, that is tense, that's as subtle as a brick dropped from a great height onto your nose, and then
or
somebody goes,
anchor dropping from the sky.
100%. Now, but I know, like, here's just, sorry, my word vomit of responses. I know I'm seeing a lot of people going, oh, is it like Children of Earth? Because obviously Children of Earth is another, Whoniverse connected story. Whereas I'm sitting here going like, no, I'm getting years and years from this. That's I would say that's a closer maybe analogy.
If Children of Earth and Years had a love child, you would get this.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Sprinkle in a little bit of the Sea Devils in there as well, and voila.
Absolutely. And I think I guess, yeah, as you said, spoilers all around. It's doing the things that I really enjoy from not just a Doctor Who adjacent story, but from a Russell D. Davies series. Is I have a lead character who I really care about. Like, I really care about Barclay. And like, I'm predisposed because I like Russell Tovey. But I think he is nailing this everyman character so well. And, he kind of has that, thing that kind of makes me root for him a little bit. I'm not going to take credit for this, all right? I'm giving full credit for this next thing to my partner, Mark, right? Because credit where credit is due. Of course, for a fish-related story, we'll do a fish out of water story.
I already beat you to it in the ups and downs. That joke's been made at least twice already.
As of right now, I heard Mark. I'm right. So credit where credit is due. Really, really enjoying it. I really like we knew that they were redesigning the Sea Devils, and I'm call them Sea Devils for the moment. I'll get to it. But what they've done is they've included variety. It's like they're not all, it's back in the 70s, with all the love in my heart, we could afford one mold. That's why they all looked the same, We don't have to do that anymore. We've got 3 distinct designs in the first 2 episodes that we've seen anyway, which is great, because, not every human looks alike. So why would another race on Earth, why would they all look alike? Things like that. So that little attention to detail, I'm really enjoying. I have been on record before saying I struggle a little bit sometimes with Kate Lethbridge-Stewart. I think she's really good in this. And so obviously we can talk about that in detail. So far, I mean, all of the things I've really enjoyed are like so much more like I could, because what we do is ups and downs. I'm like, right, what were my downs? What did I not enjoy? I really enjoyed a lot of it. So like, so that's kind of my word salad thing. And I like as well, and again, something I think that when Russell T and of course, sorry, Pete Mattai as well, because they wrote it between them, but where they're firing on all cylinders is where people feel real. And for for the most part, the people who need to feel real, like there's a few kind of characters who are there to deliver a line. Do you know what I mean? Like that's fine. But yeah, Barkley feels real. His family feel real. Kate feels a bit more real here than I think in some of the previous ones. I still I feel so bad bringing this up again. Back during Empire of Death, I believe birds will sing again. What? Sorry, no, anyway, right, never mind, moving on. Whereas here, she feels like someone who's got a really tough job and she's dealing with a loose cannon who keeps going off flipping script and everything. And even though things might work out from it, she's ha ha ha, fate of the human race. Fate of the human race. Could you please read the bloody words in front of you? So no, I'm really, really, really overall enjoying this show. Takes a breath.
Well, I was just thinking as you said that, because I think there's a reason why we're feeling that about these characters. And it's something that we have been saying, we've felt has been missing more recently in Doctor Who, that used to be there much more, is that we're not just seeing the characters in their kind of important moment of high stakes running around with the Doctor. We're seeing, especially in this, those more grounded moments where we see them in their personal life. We see more than just the purpose they play or the role they play for the purpose of this episode. So we're starting to kind of understand them a bit more, because we're seeing a lot of growth in Barkley, but we're not just seeing him grow from, being this nervous character to this more confident character all in one location. I think the reason that we're seeing that growth is because we're starting to understand the character more by seeing him in an environment where he is the smallest person in the room, but also seeing him in an environment where he is the biggest person in the room with his family. So we're seeing that he's not this one-note character. All humans have different sides to them, and it depends on their circumstances and where they are and who they're with as to whether they're really confident or whether they're really anxious. And that's what I think works really well here, is that we're seeing Barkley in his confident form with his family, and we're starting to see that confidence then bleed into his role within the kind of wider, more important room of officials, to kind of realize that he does have a worth and does have a say and can make a difference. And I mentioned in the ups and downs as well that that's so important, because Barkley is our way into it. Barkley is us. He is our point of relation when watching this episode. So it's important that we feel that connection to that character, because he represents most people in the world. We are all the everyman character who doesn't really get a voice, doesn't often get to have a say in how the world works or make a difference. And so when an opportunity like that does come up, you're rooting for him because he is us. He represents us getting to have a say in the room where usually a group of 20-odd people get the voice. So I think that's what works really well, is that we're seeing all sides of this character. And the same with Kate as well. I think we'll get on to that scene. But I think that regardless of how that scene made people feel or what people's thoughts are on the scene, the fact is we're seeing Kate in a different environment to the one we're used to seeing her in. So immediately that gives her more depth because we're seeing a vulnerable side to her that we don't usually see. And in Doctor Who, we're not usually allowed that because she isn't the main character. And so whenever we do see her, she just serves the purpose she's there to serve, but we don't really get much more from that. So this is really great at building up those characters and giving them more development and more growth and more depth. Not all of them, as you say. There are some that I still feel like... And I sometimes feel like that's a criticism maybe we had with the unit in Doctor Who, is that there seems to be so many people that you don't have time to go into depth for all of those characters. So while some of them feel very full, some of them still feel very... one note, very two-dimensional. We've only got 3 episodes left, so I don't think we're going to have 3 episodes that are just going to slowly dive into each of these characters' lives.
I think that is probably fair. Yeah. That's really about kind of like continuing with the fish out of water analogy. But yeah, like without, the central, the fired arrow, which is the Doctor's story and the Doctor's point of view, you get it's been said in Doctor Who many times before, you get the stories of the ones left behind, or of the ones, on the long way round. I'm also not feeling the lack of Doctor. You know what I mean?
No.
Like in the same way that, Torchwood didn't require the Doctor to be in it. Obviously Children of Earth in my opinion, Children of Earth is the strongest Torchwood story.
Absolutely.
And if there was ever a time, and they directly address it there, I suppose to speak of, they talk about the Doctor in this. Barclay says he met the Doctor once. And I love how he keeps it vague enough that, could be any incarnation, and it's like, but not every problem, despite as global as it might be, has to be solved by the Doctor. Otherwise, what the hell is the point of unit? And I like that as well. I like that they addressed, yeah, of course the Doctor exists, without, kind of bending over backwards to be like, oh, here's why the Doctor can't come this week.
Although you do still have the 14th Doctor just lounging around.
Yeah, beat me to it. That is the one thing. That is the... sorry, Russell, but that's the big problem with bi-generation, is that you if you don't explain that, you have to then wonder, did he just stop caring?
Yeah, has he just had a complete personality switch since the last time we saw him, and he's now the master?
I think sadly, as fun as I do, I catch myself rewatching, slight tangent, I catch myself rewatching 3 Generations an awful lot, because apparently I like death, Ellie. No, I like rebirth. Reframe that.
That's better.
And I like that, the scene is a lot of fun. I really like the scene where the 15th Doctor arrives, and I love the energy of it. But it's just so many problems come from it. Like, you had the other Doctor stuck in another universe. Grant, he can't come back. Fair enough. The other guy, he always turns up. Sidebar. Anyway, I don't foresee, I guess, predictions. Maybe I'm jumping right to the end of this video. I do not foresee a David Tennant cameo at any point during this.
Please don't
there
do
maybe
that.
should
This
be,
is such a good show. Please don't ruin it by doing something like that. Please. I guess this does bring us to a topic that is worth talking about. When the marketing for this,
yeah,
it seemed like they were kind of doing everything they could to not mention in any way that it was linked to Doctor Who.
Yeah, that's fair.
There was no from the Whoniverse, there was no from the world of Doctor Who. It was very much marketed as its own standalone thing. I don't know whether that was done on purpose. I don't know whether they were purposely trying to keep it separate and then hopefully pull in non-Doctor Who viewers to watch as well, which is fine. But then I guess the question is, when you then have the Doctor being mentioned as often as he has been in just 2 episodes, what actually was the intention here? It just gets a little bit confusing that it was marketed as something standalone, but then presented with lots of references to the Doctor. I mean, I don't necessarily, even if it's not marketed as a spin-off, it is. It is one. It always has been.
No, yeah,
It hasn't. It doesn't change what it was. But it's just interesting that they chose to market it in one way, but then link it so heavily in the actual thing.
I think there might be maybe a double edge to that, because when you're in the universe of Doctor Who, which this show is, it would be, and especially when you're working with unit, whatever. Now, if you were in, you know, remote station in the Antarctic and a dog is running toward them and they have their own problems, and everyone who got the reference, you're lovely. But like, if you're in a universe where you're working with a group that works closely with the Doctor, you have to address the fact the Doctor exists. Several people have met the Doctor. I think it would feel weird if they didn't. When it comes to the marketing of it, I'm not really sure, because obviously there's so much outside stuff going on. This is part of the Disney deal. This is still co-financed by Disney. I know it is currently only available on iPlayer and will be available on Disney Plus worldwide, I think, in 2026.
Yeah, when we know the date, we'll tell you the date. But as of now, we don't know when, I'm afraid.
Yeah, just, I think basically the marketing says it will be there later. So I don't know, possibly, I don't know if part of it is because of the uncertainty / strangeness of what's happening between the BBC and Disney. Like, this definitely feels to me like a BBC show, if that makes sense. In the way that, although they weren't specifically, but in the way that It's a Sin and Years felt closer to, you know, kind of like, again, I'm just saying BBC as a kind of a catch-all. Whereas Doctor Who, as it was meant to during the Disney, it felt like it was more of a bigger kind of thing, less of a BBC show. I'm really not articulating this well. I just wonder if there was a deliberate push to make this feel like a come back to BBC show. Now, that wouldn't explain, for example, I know there's no Whoniverse ident in the beginning. Like, I do think, like, because Whoniverse is everything from An Unearthly Child, right through, at least it is now, right? Everything from there up is part of the Whoniverse, which I like. You know, it's a silly word, but I've been watching Star Trek since I was 2. I'm very used to silly words, you know. Quattro triticale. Yeah. Again, fair play, whoever got that reference.
I got that reference.
Hey. So I don't know. It certainly hasn't. Stopping that sentence, because I was going to say it certainly hasn't affected how I approach the show. Maybe it has. So all of the kind of initial, and I was part of this as well, going like, is it going to be like Children of Earth? Is it going to be like Children of Earth? Like Children of Earth is, or was released long before the word Whoniverse was officially coined, we'll say. People have been using it for a long time. And it does feel like going back to that era. So it could be that maybe there is a deliberate change. Like when Doctor Who returns, you know, Christmas 2026, maybe the Whoniverse push or the Whoniverse ident itself might be retired. Because there's been a Doctor Who universe, well, since 1963, but then with the extended, with the books, with comics, with audio, you know, it could just be a kind of a really boring marketing thing that maybe they tried Whoniverse, didn't see much of a change of the needle and said, right, we'll try something different.
Well, it's interesting because the term Whoniverse was introduced basically from the 60th anniversary onwards. And at that point in time, the Whoniverse consisted of, or the idea was that we were going to build this wider MCU-style world of lots of spin-offs. And the intention was, or it was literally created with the first spin-off being this one. So it's a very confusing thing that the Whoniverse was kind of created for this very reason, for this show to then launch more of, for it to then be marketed as something so separate. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the offices where these conversations are happening. I'd just love to know what the heck is going on.
Like that is I think fair. I mean, like, wouldn't we all? I still say, I mean, I can't wait till NDAs lift and we get, you know, the full behind the scenes of all of this, you know, the Disney deal, because if nothing else, as confusing or this or that as it's been, it's very interesting, even if it's mundane. Because I suspect, here's my 2 cents, I suspect an awful lot of the things that we spend our time theorizing on and is probably so much more. Somebody had a whiteboard and drew a line through something, you know, as opposed to it being this or that or this kind of thing, because that is just the nature and the speed of how things are done in the room. And that can be both really frustrating because then, you know, you have theorizing and whatever, of which we do rather a lot, but it could also be quite funny in a way as well. Like, you know, kind of, oh, I wonder why, you know, the Whoniverse thing, like, you know, imagine it was like, you know, someone is sitting there watching the first airing of this going like, Jim, where's the Whoniverse logo? Oh God, I forgot to put it on.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I'm sure things like that. I'm not saying that happened this time, but I'm sure things like that happen from time to time. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it was included on the re-edited version of the Sea Devils that was also aired on BBC Four
Not a chance.
prior to The War Between the Land and the Sea airing. The Whoniverse logo was, or the ident was on that. So maybe someone did just forget to add it. Who knows? But then obviously if we want to go down a more sinister route, there is obviously Doctor Who has been, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's been a rocky road over the last 2 seasons in the Disney era. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say that maybe interest has dwindled or people have maybe walked away. Lots of thoughts on the last 2 seasons there have been thoughts. So coming into this, did they purposely want to separate them because they wanted to keep it separate from the kind of controversy that there has been surrounding the main show of late? There's been lots of discussions about it. So maybe they purposely wanted to keep it separate to try and not get people to decide. They didn't want people to go, oh, well, it's part of all that Doctor Who mess that's going on, so we won't watch that.
My initial reaction to that, it might sound quite cynical, which is there's no such thing as bad press.
Well,
So
this
if
is
people
true.
are talking about something, I would say it's much more likely for particularly the bean counters to jump on that. Because, you know, obviously, and I mean, like, let's, you know, we're talking straight to each other here, and also I'm talking straight to anybody watching this. Hashtags, tags, these things are real considerations, you know, like this is, we live in the world where, you know, obviously to be seen, you have to kind of get through the crush, because, you know, there's a lot of people who are making, you know, a lot of content all the time, and to be seen, you need to be in the conversation. So that would be why my cynical, you know, sort of money-minded brain says, I don't think that's the case. I don't think they want to steer away from any controversy. I think when it comes to getting eyes on things, controversy is only a good thing. That itself, I'm well aware of that statement. We can do an entire series of videos on, you know, kind of on that and the impact that that has had on how television is made these days. You know, like, which I think, you know, obviously there's bits about how television is made we can certainly get into now in a few minutes with other things in this. I would say my gut says no. I would not want. I would not believe that they want to avoid any connection to everything. Now, what they might do, and I think they are doing, is the way it's been framed and marketed is that it is separate connected. it is in that universe, it's in that conversation, but it's not the next episode of Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm. And it is very different.
It
There
is
are similarities, but it's very different. But I guess the million-dollar question and the conversation that has been on everybody's lips and going around after these episodes have aired is it better than the last 2 seasons of Doctor Who? How does it compare?
I think my feeling on that is, well, I suppose we have to see the next 3. It is a very strong start. Like, I really enjoyed these first 2 episodes. I think it's also, as quick as they went, it's also a little bit of a slower pace because it's a 5-part story as opposed to 1 episode that will probably get a sequel. So is it better? I think I'm going to judge it differently. There are definitely episodes of Doctor Who recently I have enjoyed less than these 2. And then there's episodes of Doctor Who that, are, they're way up there. Like, the story of the engine is still, my number 1 over the last while.
It's interesting because I think episodes like The Story in the Engine have similarities that to The War Between the Land and the Sea. There's elements that I think are better in this, and I've been hoping or wanting to see in the main show itself. And for whatever reason, be that the structure of how they tell their stories or the fact that they have a plan and they want to stick to it, I just feel like there are some elements that I felt have been missing in the main show that used to be there that are in this and are in some of the stronger episodes of the main show. But such as, we spoke about the tension. Like, I feel like tension has been lacking in the main show. Not all the time, but for the most part, there used to be a lot more tension in the episodes. You'd be hooked and you'd be gripped and you'd be hiding behind the sofa in moments. So I think for this, that tension is definitely something that I wouldn't say is better, but it has been handled so much. It's been spread out, I guess, better in this than in the main show. And most importantly, I think this has taken the time to explore the depth of the characters more. And something I've been saying about the main show is that it feels very rushed, and what's sacrificed for that is the quieter moments that help us connect to the characters on a deeper level. And as you say, this is a 5-episode story, so there's time for that to happen. There's time for them to have some quieter moments and for us to see the characters in more vulnerable places and learn more about them. Whereas I think where that used to be more of a focus in Doctor Who, it's not been so much here or more recently. So yeah, it's hard to say is one better than the other because they're so different. But I think at face value, I would say I've come out of these ones feeling much happier and feeling much more confident that it's going to continue to be good than I have watching Doctor Who in the last couple of years. I think the thing with Doctor Who is it's been so up and down that you just don't know what's going to happen each week. And sometimes you go in, one week it's great, so you go in the following week thinking it's also going to be great, and then you're disappointed. And so you're never quite sure what level the episode you're watching is going to be on. Whereas this, I feel like at least in the first 2 episodes, it's consistently stayed on the same sort of serious tone. It also takes itself more seriously, which I don't want Doctor Who to completely take itself seriously because that's not what Doctor Who is. But I do think it's kind of wavered on a point where it started to be so unserious that as an audience, you're going, I can't really engage with this or get hooked with this because you're going so silly now that I can't suspend my disbelief anymore.
No, I know. I hear that. Like, this is like Homo, Aqua, and the Plastic Apocalypse are most definitely set in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Like this feels like this could be happening in that building over there, which is something I really enjoy. One of the things I really enjoy about again, Years and Years, even though that is set incrementally in the future, it keeps it very, very grounded in a lot of the things that affect us today. Now, as we said in the very beginning, subtle as a brick to the face. This is about climate change. This is about what humans have done to the planet. And I think, here's my just rattling through my brain now. I think where Russell is strongest, whether you like how he does it or not, he's strongest when he has something to say. And I do think that some of Doctor Who over the last couple of years hasn't been about anything. Or hasn't had, a really direct kind of through line or kind of a reason. There has been good stories, as we've mentioned. There's been good acting. There's been, it hasn't been bad, but where, you go back to, again, just focusing on Russell, season 1 was sort of about, it was about Bad Wolf. Season 2 was about Torchwood. Season 3, The Master. It was about something. And within that, there was lots of stories, and I don't think we've really had that. Like, we've talked about the struggles of the last 2 years, whereas this is about something. And it's about how we as people deal with things that usually we have no power over whatsoever. Because, how resistant are they to Barclay being the one to speak to Salt? He's speaking for the human race. How could an everyman speak for the human race? And it's so, like, what we've seen from Russell earlier before. And again, Pete McTighe. And I'm really enjoying that element of it because it gives me something to hook on to. Like I am invested in this story. And, like even in the plastic apocalypse where Barclay is forced to say, we will commit to, by 2061 and everyone really care. We as a viewer know that how many times have we read those sort of platitudes, and of course we can't this year because unfortunately we found a new oil field, and he's playing on that so well. And the bit I enjoy, obviously the fun bit of sci-fi is you can do this, but when you've Salt just goes, yeah, no, like we've heard this so often, we're not going to do it again, which itself leans on the time we have spent as humanity hearing all of these promises that never happen and that never come true. And, kind of what we want to do about them. In Doctor Who, that storyline, this whole storyline would probably be maybe half of an episode.
Yeah,
which is
that's
fine.
the
We've
difference.
seen episodes do that. And we've seen episodes do that really, really well. But yeah.
This is 5 episodes to really dive into one story, and where Doctor Who has an 8-episode season and you're trying to tell 6 different stories with one story that also weaves in and out, but also there's no time to explore it in enough detail for it to pay off well. Whereas this, you have the time. I mean, if anything, there was one slight criticism that I did have when we got to episode 2 is that actually the pace was just maybe too slow in areas.
It slowed down. Yeah,
it's very slow. But I think I would take that over it feeling so rushed that I don't really feel connected to anything. And obviously, once we get to the end of this episode, things are changing up now. We're going to switch locations. We're not staying in this one room because it felt quite static, maybe episode 2 being confined a lot to that one room. Lots of conversation happening. And I love that we're having more kind of serious conversation scenes. But obviously, to keep your audience engaged, you do have to switch things up. But you've got 5 episodes to tell one story, and I think that makes a whole world of difference. So maybe moving forward, Doctor Who needs to go down the route they did with Flux, maybe. And instead of trying to tell all these separate stories and try and weave something, maybe if this is a success, maybe the way forward is to try and tell one story over multiple episodes.
Well, do you know, actually, Joe, I completely agree with you. And to the people whose eye might have just twitched hearing the word flux, first of all, I see you. I started doing the ups and downs with Flux. But the funny thing is that, those of us of a certain age, that's what Doctor Who did for you. They did serials, they did stories. Genesis of the Daleks is five episodes, I think. Like Pyramids of Mars is 4 episodes to tell one story. Sure, they
The
might.
War Games was 10.
Nonsense. Nonsense. Hang on, the Trial of a Time Lord is still being made. No. Like, so I think that would be a good thing. It's funny because, like we've talked many times about, the merits of episodic over serial. I think serial is something that suits Doctor Who quite well.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to stay that way. I mean, again, kind of, the golden years. Series 4 is a particular highlight, where, you have this story that culminates in Journey's End, but in that you have standalones like, Unicorn and the Wasp, which is silly, it's fun, it's great crack. It gave Felicity Jones to the masses, like it was a lot of fun. And then, but they kept the balance in that season of the overall story, which you can do with a few more episodes. So keeping that sort of tight ongoing story. It doesn't have to be as tight as this for a universe as expansive as, when you've got the TARDIS, but something that does kind of link things together a bit more, rather than, say, a season where you can watch a bunch of things out of order. And and then you watch the finale, and there has been a little bit of that feeling over the last while. Whereas this one, if you watch these out of order, so lost.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm excited to see where it's going to go. Well, how I'm intrigued to know how it's actually going to end, because obviously the hope is that a solution will be come to, some sort of compromise. Something's going to happen, but obviously you have to consider, is that then going to affect the wider Whoniverse moving forward? Whatever decision is made, is come to at the end of this, will that then continue in what we see in the future of Doctor Who? Or is it all going to fail and we're all going to just go back to how it was when we started the episode? Like, how are they going to tie this off? And then how will that affect the future of Doctor Who and beyond? So it's...
And in a believable way. Like right now, we're 2 episodes in. It is not believable that humans will give up air travel.
No.
So they have introduced this topic, right? Russell and Pete. So what are you going to do there? Is it going to be, does one side you can't have Homo Aqua massacre all the humans, because, the Doctor can't let that happen.
If that happened and 14 is still just having a nap, just
14 has it. 14's gone somewhere. 14's gone to see bros. I saw a funny. Did you share this? A funny meme the other day where it's that scene at the end of The Giggle where it's 14 and Mel and Donna are sitting in the garden just having a barbecue as all of the rubbish falls down around them.
They go, nah, someone else will fix that.
It's like, the other guy will get that.
So there's one more thing I just want to cover before we wrap this up, because I feel that people need us to talk about it. It's slightly off topic from the more serious conversation.
Arms?
Well, that, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And someone else's arm, because we do need to just talk about that scene.
Oh, yes.
With Kate and Colonel Ibrahim, who has put the sexy into Colonel Sexy in this scene. But I may throw a spanner in the works here, and I want to know your thoughts as well, because I think everyone just expected, while everyone else was kind of not enjoying that scene, for me to go, yeah, great, I love that scene. And while I still don't have an issue with Kate and Colonel Ibrahim having a relationship, I did find that this scene made me feel really uncomfortable.
I think, in a way, is it because it's a Doctor Who adjacent show? And we don't really do that in Doctor Who. I mean, I know, yes, the Doctor has, depending on the incarnation, has turned up the sexy, turned down the sexy. Matt Smith was as asexual as it's possible to get as the Doctor. And I still know, I just keep thinking back to the 50th, when, 10, cases Elizabeth first. I was like, is there a lot of this in the future? It does start to happen, yeah. But I do wonder, is that because it's not something we generally do in Who-related shows?
I think there is a bit of that. I think more specifically, it's not something it's not something we've seen at all from Kate. And so it's kind of gone from like 0 to 100 with nothing in the middle. And so it feels a bit like watching your teacher, is how I described it in The Ups and Downs, because it's like, that happens and you don't begrudge it happening. You don't need to see it happening, and it makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, the fact that you've watched that. And like, it could have been way more graphic than it was, but it just felt like it wasn't the right tone. So yeah, first of all, it felt like we've not seen Kate in this like sexualized way before, and so it just felt a little bit almost unnatural. And she didn't really seem like she was that into it. And I know there was a lot going on, and she had a lot going on in her mind, but it also just felt a little bit like, what's going on here?
So I hear what you're saying. You're saying that there should be something in the middle. They should leave room for Jesus, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
No, but I think also, and I think the main thing for me, and you'll know this from another couple I ship who may or may not have ever been confirmed in a different franchise, because it's a very similar vibe. It is a very similar vibe of like, the captain and then the first officer vibe going on here. But I think for me, the relationship between those two is less about the physical, less about it just being sex, and more about the connection and the comfort and her having someone who understands the hardships she faces, because she has a very secretive job. So there's not many people she can go home and unwind to, because they can't be told about all the things she's dealing with. He's someone who understands everything she's dealing with because he's constantly by her side. So it's someone that she can take comfort in, who she can completely open up with. But also someone that can take on some of that burden and who can, help hold her up in those moments. And I think the reason I liked what we were seeing in those subtle moments in Doctor Who is that they weren't about physical lust. They were about comfort and care and someone being there to comfort her. So, those subtle moments in Doctor Who, which is obviously more child focused, if you like, were less. This scene wasn't graphic necessarily, but it was more about someone just being there with her late at night and giving her a cup of tea, or helping her get up, or just being by her side and having that look of comfort between them. And so I think the scene itself would have been more beneficial to the story if, rather than him just kind of ignore what she's saying and just try to be this lustful man, if she'd been curled up on the sofa and be contemplating all these issues, and he'd simply come and sat beside her, given her a cup of tea and put his arm around her to kind of listen to what she was saying, I think that would have given us a better kind of vibe of what I feel this relationship should represent. So I think the relationship itself isn't something that shouldn't be there, and I think there is a story to be told. And for right or wrong, I think obviously a lot of people have issue with the fact that he's her subordinate, and I get that. But I do feel that the tone wasn't right. The way they went about this scene felt more like they were going, hey, that Torchwood episode that was episode 2 of Torchwood that was basically going, this is for adults. I kind of feel like this scene was more of a way of them going, see, this isn't Doctor Who. We have sex in this series, as opposed to being what it should have been, which was more exploration of why this relationship is important for Kate as a character. And I have fear that one of those is not going to survive to the end of this series. I think there's a reason that this relationship is being explored, and I fear that the reason is that there's going to be a sacrifice or a loss. And seeing as Kate is more of the main character, I worry it may be Colonel Ibrahim that ends up biting the dust.
Well, I certainly hope not, but I understand. Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think of Randy Meek's rules of surviving horror films. Don't have sex. If you have sex, you will die.
Mm.
And, kind of, oh, all right then. So yeah, I don't know, interesting. I definitely see what you mean about them pushing for a more adult tone.
Yeah.
And, because again, not to harp on about it, but years and years definitely included scenes that were for an adult audience. It's a Sin is for adults. And Children of Earth, in a slightly different way, in a highly more traumatic way, scenes for adults as well. John Frobisher. I think for me, I'll need to see if there's any more with it. It didn't particularly stand. I mean, we did notice we were sitting around the couch being just like, well, hello. So it is there to be noticed. I won't say it didn't stand out too much to me, but then again, I am a jaded old man, so that could be part of it as well. Be like, oh look, they're happy. I
think from what I've seen is a lot of response to it is obviously people who don't want that relationship to be a thing, full stop. Whereas I'm not on that side of the fence. But I didn't love it as much as I think everyone was expecting me to love it. But I think for all the reasons I've just explained, it wasn't just because I was like, oh, I don't just ship them together because I think they look good together. There's a reason. There's like a deeper reason why I think it's an interesting storyline to follow. So I'm nervous but excited to see where it's going to go, but I am slightly concerned about where this is going to end.
Okay, so you're now reckoning one of their numbers up, yeah?
I do. I really hope it's not the case, but I do. I feel like one of them is not making it to the end of this. And I feel like it might be him. So I guess the last thing we need to do, as we always do, this is slightly different because the episodes are serialized, but it is tradition to do our ranking. There's only 2 episodes so far, so Sean, could you please rank Homo, Aqua and Plastic Apocalypse?
I would go Plastic Apocalypse 1, Homo, Aqua 2. But yeah, really enjoyed them both.
Yeah, I'm the same. They were both brilliant, but I think the second episode was maybe just slightly more gripping. More things happened. It was very dramatic. So it's looking good. Hopefully they just get better and better. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Sean, for joining me for this discussion. Everybody let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And we will see you next week.
Woo, see you then. Bye.
Bye.